What's up? So, yeah, I hadn't made a video in like a couple days or a week or something. When you don't make a video for like a week, people assume you're dead. I'm not dead, alright? If I die, I promise someone will put something on my channel that says so. But they'd probably remove my channel, wouldn't YouTube? I don't know, whatever. The point is not the topic. Most people seem to have enjoyed the intro. A couple people said it was tacky and lame and all this shit. Don't care, alright? The only thing on YouTube I consider to be too tacky and lame to do is pander for money without product. I mean, if you want to sell a book, I'm 100% for that, or something, some item, you can sell it. I got no problem with that. But just straight out pandering for money, I'm not for that, and I will never do that. All right, so that's the only thing I consider to be out of bounds. So consider it a trade-off. I get an intro to stroke my ego, and you don't ever have to watch me beg for your money. And I know that if I did beg for money, I'd probably get money. I mean, I've seen how much some of these people get just beg. It's ridiculous. Anyway, whatever. The point is that you can suck my dick. I wanted to answer a question somebody sent me. Now, it seems that I've become like the go-to guy for fucking questions or comments or arguments against or for democracy. Like, I'm the democracy guy. And in the course of answering this question, I'll explain to you why it's not necessary to just whatever, you'll see. All right. The question is titled Majority Problem. How would you address the problem if it truly is a problem in a democracy that if 60% is necessary and 49.0001% can override a decision, and in a way there is a minority rule? Well, there's a couple parts to this question. First of all, this weird percentage point that you put here, 0001, is the reason we have a representative democracy. People ask, why don't we have a direct democracy? This is why. Plus the fact that it would be, can you imagine trying to get everyone to vote on every single issue? It wouldn't happen. At least not now. You would have had to start out that way and have people used to it, the idea. But that's part of the reason why we have representative democracy. But you're right. Sometimes a minority can have minority rule. The minority doesn't ever pass anything, but they can stop things from happening, as you pointed out. And I don't know what people. I've been asked this question several times, and I don't know what they expect me to say. There is no answer to this question. There is no solution to this problem. Okay. Unless you want to artificially remove and eliminate the minority of the majority, like a Confederal Socialist does, or you just want to have some sort of weird requirements on citizenship or voting. There's no way that you can get out of this problem. But I don't really consider it a problem. All right, think about it this way. It can be a benefit to have the minority having the power to overrule the majority, but it works best when everyone is responsible. Take this for example. When the Iraq War happened, and when we were authorizing more money or more troops or whatever, the Democrats could have stopped that. They were the majority, they were the minority, and they could have stopped that legislation from being passed. They didn't do that though. But that's why it's the ability for the minority to overrule the majority is there, so that they can stop the majority from doing something stupid, right? That it's all about checks and balances. Each branch checks and balances the other, and they have checks and balances within the same branch of government. The whole goal here within a democracy is to try to keep any one group or any one person from having more power, from having too much power. That's the goal here. The limitation of power. All right. Now, people are always asking me to defend democracy and all this shit. This is my position on democracy, okay? It's really my only viable option because there is not much room to either side of the political spectrum. You can't go much further to the left before you hit shit like communism. which always leads to dictatorship, or anarchy, which I believe would leave a power vacuum, which would lead to dictatorship. And you can't go much further to the right before you run into shit like fascism and all these dictatorships and whatnot. What I'm trying to do is give us a government, which I believe we need a government, without a dictator, okay, or some military dictatorship or some kingdom, whatever. Without that there. That's what I'm trying to get, all right? And you have to consider how fortunate we are to live in the time we do, because most human beings that have ever lived on the planet, that have lived in a country or a nation or whatever, have lived under some sort of dictator, king, queen, some sort of ruling general, some shit like that, all right? And we don't. Well, I don't know where you're watching me from, but at least in this country we don't. I consider that a good first step. If someone can provide me an alternative to democracy that provides me government and no dictator and the right mix of government powers that I like, I'd be glad to look at it. Until then, I'm going to have to go with my default. And because it is the default, because it is the middle of the ground, it doesn't do everything great, okay? It can do everything mediocre, but it doesn't really do any one thing real well. That's part of the trade-off. And part of the trade-off is having this problem of the minority overruling the majority. So, I mean, if that speech, maybe that makes you think that democracy is worse, whatever. But what I just said is my position on that. The other day I was at not Halloween USA, but one of the Halloween stores, one of the seasonal Halloween stores, and I walked in, and there was like this animatronic zombie chick. It kind of looked like the ghoul ghost thing, whatever that girl was from The Grudge, that kind of like crawled along the floor and on the stairs and stuff. I think that was The Grudge. And anyway, when you activated it, when you walked in front of it, it would start crawling and making noises and shit. And I accidentally activated it right as this woman and this little girl must have been 3 or 4 or something like that, were coming in, and she saw it, and this little girl freaked out and tried to run out of the store, and she ran into the door. So I was pretty proud of myself for having inadvertently caused that to happen. So I was attacked by a zombie, and that got me thinking about zombies. Because I know a lot of people have sat around, usually when they're high, having conversations about zombie survival or zombie contingency plans. I've done this. I'm not afraid to admit it. I've been really high before. But it's not a necessary contingency plan. I consider aliens to be a more likely disaster than zombies. That leads us on to the topic of contingency plans. Excuse me. You're supposed to have a household plan for fire or, natural disaster, tornado, whatever, depending on where you live, whatever your regional threat to your life is, hurricanes, mudslides, fire. You're supposed to have a plan for that. But we don't really talk about other contingency plans. Zombie contingency plan, not necessary. Okay? But I think there are other contingency plans that some people consider bizarre or whatever that I think you should have. All right? So I've compiled a list of contingency plans that most people don't have. All right? The number one contingency plan that most people don't have is nuclear war. All right? And whenever I say that, people look at me weird, but there's still thousands and thousands of active warheads that are aimed, that are programmed to hit where you live. All right. Most of the people that watch my videos live in America or in the UK. Okay. No matter where the fuck you live, especially in the UK because it's so small, you are in the direct line of sight of a Russian missile. Okay. This is a guarantee. All right. Partially has to do with our military bases in your country. My bad. But that's just the way it is, okay? There are missiles aimed at you. If you live in a major city, a lot of the people that watch my videos are from California, because apparently everyone lives in California. You live in LA, you live in San Francisco, there's a missile aimed at you. You could be killed. In 20 minutes, we could all die. They could launch the missiles right now, and 20 minutes later we could die. It's a serious threat, and it has been a threat for a long time, but nobody really did anything about it. People used to build bomb shelters, yeah, but I think most people didn't do it because it freaked them out too much, because there was this constant, people really thought it could happen, and I think they would consider it too real if they actually did something about it. But I think it's unwise for you to not have a contingency plan for this issue, because your chances of survival are going to increase a whole lot more if you understand what to do. All right? Do you have to build a shelter? Not necessarily. But you should have food and water and whatnot. You should always have food and water. But you can have the supplies you need to build a shelter. All right? To build a shelter that will keep out radiation for a couple of weeks as you cower in your basement. All right? Read up on fucking on fallout and radiation. Take you an hour, learn what you need to do, then you have that information. All right? Probably nothing will ever happen, but if it does, you got that information. The secondary odd contingency plan, I think, which is even more likely than nuclear war, is some sort of devastating plague or disease, something. Some asshole releases smallpox again. Something like that. I think it's important to have a contingency plan for that. That is slightly more complicated, but very important. All right? The threat of widespread disease is real, and is is an even bigger threat now with the way travel works. And if somebody released smallpox again, if something like Ebola became airborne, anything like that would be devastating, and you should have some sort of contingency plan. You should have an understanding of quarantine. You should have an understanding of basic medical procedures, which you should have anyway. They should teach you that shit in school. You should have an understanding of how to properly handle a body, a corpse, if it dies from disease. All right, how to properly bury that. All that shit. And it sounds really bizarre, but take you an hour, read about it, then you have that information. All right. And the third and final strange contingency plan that I have is unrest of some sort of civil violence, and this could also be rolled into invasion, but that's not going to happen. But recently, with the way everyone's been acting, I mean, I just read a story about how we're having historic bullet shortages. What the fuck is wrong with you people? But things like that concern me, okay? So you should have a contingency plan for riot, some sort of civil unrest. And you should always have a contingency plan for that, because that's the most likely thing. That's more likely than disease or nuclear war. We're not special. Just because we live in this country doesn't mean that these things can't happen to us. So that's your list. I want everyone to go out and learn about those three things. Okay, it's your homework. Right. So that was my public service announcement. So I don't know. Whatever. I'll find something better to talk about tomorrow.